Hello and welcome to this week's Travel News with John Guinn on ukhealthradio.com. I have an extended travel news section this week, including stories about more disruptive passengers on a flight and news for people who are well travelled and may be looking to go to the USA in the near future. But the main part of this week's show is to talk about the history of package holidays. Brexit and the EU referendums in big news. I'm not saying whether to come in or out, although the engineer in me likes to test and measure, so it'll be interesting to see what happens if we come out. But the EU has brought a lot of consumer protection in, and part of that is the package holiday regulations of 1992. So this week I'm going to be talking about package holidays and the changes in protection. If you've had any experiences about holidays, protection for holidays, either working for you or not working for you, facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show is the place to share your experience. The weather in the UK is never reliable, so millions each year go away, exchanging the British cold and wet weather for something more tropical. This used to mean popping down to the high street travel agent to book a package holiday. Things have changed over the last few years, probably firstly with teletext offering unbeatable deals for those willing to read through pages and pages of prices, which were followed by a long conversation on a premium rate line, and why nobody figured out that the holidays were cheaper because the travel companies were making up the difference by having expensive phone lines, I'll never know. And secondly, the internet has also allowed holiday makers to bypass the travel agent and to book holidays direct with travel companies, hotels, airlines, and sometimes doing this you can save hundreds of pounds. So, with this new way of booking taken over, is there still room for a traditional package holiday? Way back in history, the British have traditionally been a nation of travellers, although not always for relaxation. On the whole, it's probably for war and empire building. But there were some tourists, and these tourists went on medieval religious pilgrimages, and some believe this religious trip gave us the term holiday as a derivative to holy day. Bringing a straw donkey back from Spain can also be traced back to these religious pilgrims, as they like to bring back souvenirs from their trips to remind them of holy places they had seen and the shrines they had encountered. A progression away from the religious reasons for travelling, a new form of journey started in the 16th century, and this was called the Grand Tour. Many wealthy families sent their children off to see the sounds and sights of the major European cities. This tour was seen as an essential educational experience, and when you think about it, grand tours are still happening today, except that instead of wealthy children travelling, the travellers are now backpackers, gap year students, and those who just need to escape their everyday working lives. The first dedicated travel company was Cox and Kings, which formed way back in 1758. Richard Cox was the regimental agent for the Foot Guards, and this company organised the payments, clothing and other travel arrangements for members of the armed forces to all parts of the British Empire. So, with all this history of travelling overseas, to be honest, I do find it a little bit disappointing to find that the first proper recognised organised tour was actually a 12-mile train journey. This trip was sold by a Mr. Thomas Cook in 1841. Yes, the same Thomas Cook who founded the travel company we all know today. Thomas Cook was a cabinet maker and a former Baptist preacher. He believed that alcohol and a lack of education were the causes of Victorian problems. I wonder if he would have started his travel company back then if he knew that one day Thomas Cook would be associated with Club 1830. Probably not, but that's just my opinion. You're listening to The Travel Show with John Guinn on ukhealthradio.com. Cook was walking from his home in Market Harbour to Leicester to attend a temperance meeting. While walking, he had a brainwave. He should use the railways to further his preferred form of social reform. Once at the meeting, Cook suggested that a special train be engaged to carry the temperance supporters of Leicester to a meeting in Loughborough, around 12 miles away. After receiving the backing of his group, Cook contacted the Midland Railway Company, and on the 5th of July 1841, around 500 passengers travelled to Loughborough in open carriages, there and back for a shilling. Of course, there had been railway excursions before, but this first trip included entrance to an entertainment held on private grounds, the train tickets, and food for the rail journey. Over the next 3 years, Cook organised trips for temperance societies and Sunday schools. The first commercial trip was in 1845, which was a trip to Liverpool. As well as being more involved than the previous trips, Cook also produced a booklet which can be regarded as the great-great-great-great-grandfather of the travel brochures we see today. From this small tour, Thomas Cook and Son grew to become one of the largest and most well-known travel companies in the UK. The company grew as Cook saw the potential of a convenient, off-the-peg holiday product, which included everything for one price. He later went on to organise packages inclusive of accommodation for the Great Exhibition, even, I always struggle with that word, and then pioneered package holidays in both Britain and in Europe. Victorian Britain saw this new industry develop due to the increasing size of the middle classes, and also the increase in their disposable income. Only middle and upper classes could take the time off work and afford to pay for travel and boarding. The British were now travelling in numbers overseas, but this time it was for peaceful reasons and not for war. This new source of income was welcome and can be seen by the foreign place names that contain English words or references to the British traveller. The working classes were still staying in the UK, with day trips to coastal resorts either by train or, as in the case of Londoners, by boat along the Thames to such places such as Southend. These day trips, the numbers of them, increased after 1871 due to the Bank Holiday Act of that year. Most workers only had Sunday, Christmas Day and Good Friday off. This new act included for workers, in England anyway, Easter Monday, Whit Monday, Boxing Day and the first Monday in August. It wasn't until the Annual Holiday Bill in 1936 that having a paid holiday became a statutory right. Although this didn't have much of an effect on overseas travels, it did see a growth in holiday camps in the UK, such as Butlins. You can follow me on Twitter @holiday_hut. Still to come on this week's show, travel news, including a story about people who are well travelled to some slightly unusual destinations and may be wishing to go to the USA in the near future. I could have some bad news for you. But the main focus of this week's show is the history of package holidays. I've talked about Thomas Cook and the early days. I'm now going to start talking about holidays in a format that we'd recognise nowadays. Until the 1950s, most travel overseas was either by rail and or coaches. This changed thanks to holiday pioneers such as Vladimir Routes, who was a co-founder of the Horizon Holiday Group. I'll probably pronounce Routes wrong. As you know, dear listener, I'm not very good at pronouncing words. But anyway, the surname is spelt R-A-I-T-Z. This company, set up by Routes, started the first mass package holidays with charter flights. The first were from Gatwick to Corsica in 1950, and this later grew to include Mallorca, Lourdes, Costa Brava and Sardinia. Routes was a Russian whose family left the Soviet Union and finally settled in England. He was on his own holiday in Corsica in 1949 when he was asked by a local dignitary to encourage more British to visit the following year. He calculated that he could charter an aircraft and provide a 2-week holiday in Corsica for less than £35 per person. And please bear in mind that back then the average wage in the UK in 1950 was just over £100 a year. This didn't happen as fast as he would have hoped due to red tape. Age-old story. He only got permission to run the holiday after convincing the Ministry of Civil Aviation that the flights would only be for students and teachers. The holiday included the return flights, a tent, local wines and 2 meals containing meat a day. And the price in the end was just £32.10. So for roughly a third of the average annual income for the year, it was still a bargain though, because when you compare it to flight prices only by some of the big boys back then, a return flight from London to Nice was nearly twice the price of this 2-week holiday. It wasn't a luxurious holiday, and the camping facilities were actually left over from the construction of the airport by the US Navy. The flight also had a refuelling stop in Lyon, and the flying time was 6 hours. So the package industry, as we would recognise it today, had started, although there was more help needed from governments to aid the increase of the number of available holidays. This came from Montreal in June 1954, when amendments were made to the Convention of International Civil Aviation, which originally was put together in Chicago. This convention back in Chicago established the International Civil Aviation Organization, called ICAO, and it's a specialised agency of the United Nations, and it's charged with coordinating and regulating international air travel. The convention established rules of airspace, aircraft registration and safety, the details of the rights of the signatories in relation to air travel as well. The convention also exempts air fuels from tax. But put it more simply, they're the ones who decided on the liquids rule that has upset so many passengers nowadays each year because of their expensive perfume and makeup, and sometimes shrink gets pulled away by the security staff at UK airports. Apparently, although I've not been able to check this out properly because I really don't understand the legal speak, the amendments in Montreal were very liberal to Spain, which started the mass tourism market there really. But as I said, I've not been able to figure out how these amendments have managed to equate to getting all those high-rise hotels on the Spanish costas. You can keep up to date with travel news and leave me a message at facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. I'm talking package holidays this week on the Travel Show with John Guinn. I've done the early days, the Grand Tour, beginnings of Thomas Cook, and starting about the 60s. It was all going swimmingly, and then probably